Hello! This is the last wrap up I'm going to be filming in my house. So this is the last one with this pretty rainbow colored book backdrop, and I'm sad, but we're just gonna deal with whatever we have in the future for a while. So let's enjoy this while it lasts. I'm very thirsty, so this is a good reminder that if you are also very thirsty, or even if you're not, go get some water. Okay, so I read a total of 18 books this month, and I did something stupid literally like an hour ago. I was taking pictures of my wrap up, like of all the books that I read, and I packed them immediately. Like I took the picture and then put the books in the box and then immediately put it away. And now I'm kicking myself because I don't want to unpack it, but I didn't film this until now. So, whoops. So we are once again just gonna pop the little book up here, and yeah, sorry about that, whoops. So I'm gonna go with a reread for the first book that I'm gonna talk about, and that is Daisy Jones and the Six. And I kind of read this on a whim. I read it before a year or two ago and I really liked it. I listened to the audiobook the first time. So this is the first time reading it like as a physical copy. I prefer the audiobook, I will say, but the book is still good. It's just the way it's written is kind of in the format of like an interview. So it's all these different characters just giving interview responses or like interjecting in between each other by the person who does the interview. Like they cut it all together. And I really like that device. I think it's very unique, but it doesn't read as well as it listens. Yeah, I don't know. And so I didn't know that the show was going to be coming out so soon, and by now it's already actually out. I've seen the first episode, but I was very excited when I realized that it was out, so I was like, let me binge read the book really fast again, and I did, and it was good, and I loved it. I gave it 4 stars, I think this time. I think the first time I might have given it 5. This time I gave it 4. I do still really like it, but I don't know. I just gave it 4. Things about music usually aren't things that I like to read about. Like, I don't normally really like to read books about like musicians and that sort of thing. So I think because I was reading it, there were a couple of times where I was just like pulled out slightly or like a little bit bored by certain things. Whereas I remember when I was listening to it, even the stuff I normally wouldn't have been interested in was very interesting. So yeah, I would definitely recommend the audiobook. I would recommend this book, but recommend it as an audiobook. The next few are a couple of books that I read for a recent releases thriller and horror reading vlog. So I've already talked about those in that vlog, and if you haven't watched it, you can go watch that. But I will say a couple of things, including my rating for these. I don't really remember what I officially settled on for some of the ratings in that video, so if these don't align, just ignore that and go with this, because this is after a little bit of time away from the stories, and I was able to like kind of digest my thoughts a bit more. So first we have The Resting Place, and this is my second book by the author, and I didn't like it. It's not very good to me. I would give it maybe 2 stars, 2.5, and I'm probably not gonna read anything else by this author, no offense. This is about a woman who has face blindness, and so she witnesses the murder of a relative, but she can't tell you who the murderer was, and the whole book is just her trying to like figure out like who the murderer is. But some things toward the end did not make sense to me. There were some issues with dialogue that I had, and I just did not like it. And then I read Daisy Darker, which I did not expect to like as much as I did. This one, I will say, for the first 200 pages or so, I was very bored. And I know that's not a good selling point, but the last part really got me, and I gave it like 4 stars or 4.5. I think 4 I'm gonna settle on, just because of the end and like how it all wrapped up. So if you've been reading that one and you were kind of like not sold on it 200 or so pages in, and you were thinking like, should I continue? I think you should. But I also know that there are a lot of people who do not like the particular twist that's in this book. I like it. When that happens in things, I'm always like, oh my gosh, but it's not for everybody. So don't be mad at me if you hate it. This is kind of like an And Then There Were None retelling, sort of. It's about a family who is staying in this mansion, and people start dying, and they're trying to figure out what happened and why these people are dying. So it's very interesting. I didn't know what was going on. I really liked it. And then I read The Last Housewife, and I like this. This is about like a sex cult and a person who's trying to figure out what happened to her friend in the sex cult. I gave this 4 stars. I think I'm gonna give it 4.5 because I really liked it. There were a lot of parts that I highlighted throughout this. I found the main character like a little bit annoying at times, but also kind of relatable, so take that how you will. Yeah, I would recommend it. I'm going to read the other book by this author that's out that everybody loves. blanking on the name right now, but I know people on BookTube love it, so I'm gonna be reading it soon, and I hope I love that as much as I love this. And then I read The Weight of Blood, which is a Carrie retelling, and it's focused more on like racism and society, and it's also YA, so it's from like a teenage perspective. I really love this. I think I gave it 5 stars, or 4.5. I think I gave it 4.5 stars, but I think I gave it 5 on Goodreads because you can't do half stars, so yeah, this was really, really good. I got through this so quickly. Like, it's a thicker book, but I read it really fast. Like, I really loved it. It was so good. I think fans of Stephen King will also just really like this. I mean, I know it's inspired and like a retelling of Carrie, but even besides that, like there are a lot of other nods and like little references and stuff that I think horror lovers in general will just really have fun with. So, and then I read House of Hunger, which a lot of people love this one. It was a little bit too tame for me, which considering what it's about, that's weird to say, but I honestly wish that it pushed things a little bit further, like gone a little bit more into dark places than it did. This is about a world in which rich aristocratic families drink and like bathe and stuff in blood so that they can get some kind of like youth or powers or healing. And it's about like the blood maids who volunteer for this work and live in these places to take care of the people that they work for. There's like a lot of other stuff to this as well, but I'm not gonna go into all of it because I feel like going into it and not knowing as much will maybe be a little bit more entertaining. So yeah. Then I read Killing Stalking Volume 1, and I did not like this. It's not that it was like too graphic for me or like too upsetting or too extreme or anything like that, because I read a lot of extreme horror, especially like indie extreme horror, which a lot of bigger publishers don't publish that stuff, and so it gets pretty wild. So this wasn't like especially like boundary breaking for me. It was just, I'm just not entertained by things that are graphic for the sake of being graphic. Like, it just feels a little bit like a teenager trying to like shock you. I don't know, I'm not entertained by that. It's boring. I didn't like the story. I didn't find any of the characters interesting. I just thought it was, I'm sorry, I know it's kind of harsh. I just hated it. So yeah. Okay, and then I got some books from the library for a space horror reading vlog, and that was very fun. I was expecting to love everything, and then I didn't. So despite that, it was still fun because I did find a couple of things that I wanted to recommend in the future. So, and that's what I wanted to do that whole vlog for anyways, so I think it worked out. So the first of these that I read was Ship of Fools, and I liked this one. It was a little bit too focused on like political intrigue on the ship for me. I want more blood in space. I want less like mutiny, you know? So, unless the mutiny involves blood, but this one, spoiler, not really a spoiler, it didn't. Yeah. And then I read 2 books by the same author. So Dead Space, which I did not like. It is not about the video game. I knew that going in, but just to specify again, it is not anything to do with the video game. But also, it has nothing to do with horror. It's not a horror book. It's like marketed as horror. It's not. It's like a crime thriller space book. Like, and that's fine, but that's not what I wanted to read. And I wouldn't have chosen to read a book about like espionage and stuff, you know? Like, I don't care. That's not for me. So yeah. The other one though, Salvation Day. So I read Dead Space first, and I was very worried when I finished that because I did not like it. And I knew I had another book on the TBR for that vlog by the same author. So I was very nervous going into it. Happy to say that I loved it. I gave it 4 stars. This was so good. It's like a cult in space with like a spaceship that's like haunted. So like a haunted ship kind of, and then a space cult, and then a main character. I don't know. It's got a lot going on. I remember reading the synopsis before I actually started that book, and I did not know what was gonna happen. I was like, what are they even saying? I don't get this. But then I read it and it was fun. So highly recommend. Yeah. And then I read The Last Astronaut, and I really like this one too. This one has pretty low ratings on Goodreads, but I don't think it deserves them. Like, it was so much fun. The main character is this like mature, older like woman, and she's an astronaut, and she's got to like do something after some tragic stuff in her past happened that made her vow never to do space stuff again. So I don't know. I'm so surprised it hasn't already been adapted because I think this would make such a good movie, or even just like a limited Netflix series. So if anybody with powers that be in the Netflix department are watching this, I think you should adapt this book into a movie or show. People will love it. It's spacey, it's creepy, it's good. Okay, and then I read this, well, then I tried to read The Salt Grows Heavy, and this is an ARC that I got, like a paperback, and for some reason the formatting was all messed up. I was like missing pages. In my monthly vlog you're gonna see, because I recorded part of it because I was getting really annoyed while I was trying to read that book. I read everything that I could, but I don't feel like I have a complete picture of the story, given that so much of it was missing and it's only like 97 pages. So I did really like what I read, so I'm going to pick a copy of it up when it releases, but that's not gonna be until like May, and I don't know when I'm gonna get it. So yeah, I can't really comfortably rate this one because I didn't fully get to read it, but what I did read, I really liked. And it kind of has to do with like killer mermaid people, but like, think of like if Ariel from The Little Mermaid was actually like vicious and Prince Eric was actually like manipulative and terrible and kept her there against her will, and shenanigans ensued. Yeah, kind of like that. It's very like atmospheric, very like fairy tale-esque. The writing's very like flowery, similar to like the last book I read by the author, which I don't think is really necessary in like a book of this size. I think sometimes it can kind of detract from it. At least when the story is supposed to be modern, I think it can detract from it. But if the story is kind of like more fairy tale-esque or like dreamlike, I think it does it really well. I think it does it justice. So yeah, for a book that I couldn't fully read, I have a lot to say about it apparently. Then I read Resident Evil City of the Dead, which is the third book in the series, and this is actually the book adaptation of Resident Evil 2, the video game, which I love. So this is an amazingly fun time for me. This was a reread, but it was so good. Like, I love Claire, I love Leon, I love Ada, I just love reading about them. I love this book, I love the police station, the atmosphere, the gore, the creatures, the liquors. It's just so good and so creepy. I'm such a Resident Evil fangirl, I know, but I just love this series, and I'm really glad I'm doing a reread of it. I'm like halfway through the series now, and I am doing a reading vlog for it. So it's going like slow because I want to be sure that I can check in between. Otherwise I would have just binged it through in like 3 days. So yeah. There's a sound outside and I don't know what that is. What are they, cutting down trees? I'm trying to record. Maybe I can do it in between the sounds. Like right now it's, maybe if I time it. Cool. This is great. Okay, I'm just gonna try to get through this, and if it's loud, I'm sorry, but I don't have the time to wait. I'm supposed to be packing and moving stuff out of my house like right now, so I am also filming a reading vlog for like twisty TikTok thriller recommended books, and that's gonna be like a separate thing. So I'm not gonna say too much about the next book, but I read Verity, and I don't know why this book was in the romance section is the only thing I'm gonna say about it, because it should not have been there. This was my first Colleen Hoover book, and I know that people are very like divided on her. I don't even still know where I stand, because I feel like this doesn't give me an accurate depiction of the rest of her books. Like, I don't know what I read. I mean, I know what I read, but I don't know why it exists. Like, it was just bizarre. It was so weird. I would give it like 3 stars, I think, maybe 2.5, maybe 3, I don't know. I hated the main characters, but the story itself, and like, I didn't know what was going on, and that kept me reading it. So congrats to the author for that, I guess. And then I read Smashed by Junji Ito, and I really liked this. Like, this is probably maybe one of my new favorites, if not my new favorite of his collections. If you have not read this one and you like his other work, I definitely recommend picking it up. This has 13 stories, if I recall correctly, and they were all so good. There were a couple of like that really stood out, but there were others that like continued on like a previous story. So like a couple of them had to do with like another story that was in the collection. They were just so good. It was really good. It was really creepy. I read this home alone and I got really creeped out by myself. So this is one of the ones that genuinely actually creeped me out at parts. There's another one too. I don't remember which collection it's a part of. There's a story with like an armchair, and I won't say too much, but that one also really creeped me out. So that's not in this collection though. I just mention it for no reason. And then I read Never Let Me Go, and I have had this on my TBR for so long, and I have built it up, I think, for myself a little bit too much, because it was pretty boring. Like, no offense. It was very, very introspective, and I know that that works for some people, but for me, given my current mindset and like the fact that I'm very stressed and that I'm trying to use books as like an escape, this was a little bit too slow and a little bit too introspective for me. I gave it 4 stars. I do absolutely understand why people love it. I absolutely understand why it's won awards. But for me, at the current moment, I think maybe it just wasn't as good as I was expecting, which is a little bit of a disappointment, but totally fine. If they could just stop doing that, it would be great. I don't know what they're doing. Like, I don't even know where they are. Are they out there? Are they behind the house? Are they... I don't know. And then there are 2 more books, and I'm almost finished with both of these, one I'm listening to and one I'm reading. One I'm listening to and one I'm reading, and they are Monday's Not Coming, and that's the one that I'm listening to, and then I'm reading The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. And I'm really liking them so far. They're very different, but I don't want to say too much because I haven't finished them. So I do just want to mention them because they're going to be in my wrap-up photo, and I am going to finish this before the end of the month, but I'm filming this on like the 28th. So yeah, it's a little bit incomplete. We'll be sharing a vlog where I talk about both of those as I'm reading them. So if you want my thoughts more on those 2 books, definitely go check that out when it's posted. But yeah. All right, so otherwise, that's everything that I read this month. It was a pretty good reading month for me. The last 2 months, I read more books than there were days in the month. So for once, I actually like slowed down a little bit, and I broke that habit. That has a lot to do with the fact that I've just been really stressed, and I've also just been packing and in the middle of moving, and we are moving at the end of this month. By the time this goes up, I'm probably already moved out of my house. So there's a whole lot of like new stuff coming and uncertainty, and I'm gonna be a nervous wreck, but I have a bunch of videos that are prepped before I move. So you're still gonna see probably this background for a little bit, and yeah, please let me know if you read any of these. Let me know if there are any books that are by the same authors that I enjoyed that you would recommend, or even if I didn't enjoy them now, maybe like something else by the author I would enjoy. I don't know, just let me know. Recommend me whatever, I wanna read it. I hope you had fun watching this, and thank you for hanging out with me. I'll see you in my next video. Bye.